Hello again, this is Eric with the Paperback Warrior blog, YouTube channel, and podcast, bringing you another ranking video. On this one, I'm ranking my reads from the month of February from worst to first. These books are ranked with capsule reviews, cover artwork, and other interesting tidbits. As always, if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. This is also being broadcast as a special podcast episode as well. You should be able to find it on any streaming platform, the same as you listen to the normal podcast episodes. Audio on podcast, video on YouTube. I like to give people options because I'm a nice guy. Let's kick things off with number 17, which is Dead White. The book was published in 1983 by Tor and authored by Alan Ryan. Now, I had found very little enjoyment with Ryan's first novel, titled The Kill. It made it into our Paperback Warrior Hall of Shame. I was hoping Dead White would be better. I was dead wrong. The premise is a small town in upstate New York that is experiencing a nasty blizzard. To complicate things further, a train arrives by way of abandoned railroad tracks. Like, these haven't been used in decades. But the train pulls up, and it turns out to be a traveling circus of clowns. But these clowns may be ghosts extracting vengeance on the town. This should work and work well. The town cut off from help due to the blizzard, these killer clowns hunting the citizens down. Everyone holes up in the local hotel to fend off the clowns. That's how it should have worked. But Ryan chose to write 356 pages of people making coffee and idle chit-chat. This is absolutely one of the worst books I've ever read, and it suffers from horrendous editing. I have no idea what anyone was thinking that was remotely involved with this book. It is a disaster. Again, this is Dead White by Alan Ryan. Number 16 is Death World 2. Now, I really enjoyed the first Death World. It was published in 1960. Written by Harry Harrison. Harrison returns with Death World 2, but this is a different ball of wax. The book stars hero Jason trying to survive his capture by a warring clan. The book just recycles the same scenes over and over again. Jason escapes the warring clan, he's captured by another warring clan, and then escapes to be captured again. The whole time he's this multifaceted guy who can fix anything. Motors, ships, facilities, weapons. He just can't fix this book. It's kind of silly. It's kind of preachy at times. Skip this book. Again, it's Death World 2 by Harry Harrison. Number 15 is Forgive the Executioner. This is a British publication on New English Library from 1978, written by an unknown author to me named Andrew Lane. It's 225 pages and works like a standard entry in something like The Butcher or Death Merchant. A guy named Alan Payne is extracting vengeance on the people behind the murder of his family. But the people involved were the IRA terrorist group. So Payne infiltrates the IRA as an explosives expert, using his experience from serving in the Vietnam War. He creates little accidents that kill off his fellow IRA members. But he never stops there, and he also targets the Protestants, since he feels that the entire war between the Protestants and the IRA contributed to his family's murder. Payne runs around, gets laid a lot, and has a romance with a double agent. This was a pretty good read. Again, if you like men's action-adventure novels of the 1970s, then this book is for you. Again, it's called Forgive the Executioner by Andrew Lane. My 14th pick is The Hangman's Forest. This was authored by William Joseph and published independently in 2023. It's a crime fiction novella at 120 pages starring a detective named Ayakua San. He was dismissed from the Chicago police force due to a shooting incident. His first week on the job as a new deputy in a rural unnamed town concerns a serial killer. This weirdo is out capturing victims and hanging them in the forest, thus the name of the book. Joseph's narrative centers around the investigation and the clues leading to the murderer's whereabouts. Sprinkled in is a few presentations from the killer's point of view just to mix things up. This was an okay page-turner. Again, this is Hangman's Forest by William Joseph. Number 13 is Dark Shadows number 3, Strangers at Collins House. This was authored by William Ross as Marilyn Ross and published by Paperback Library in 1967. Of course, this ties into the television series and focuses on young Victoria Winters and her stay at the large mansion in Maine titled Collins House. Now, in the television series, a vampire named Barnabas eventually appears, and the show takes on a supernatural feel. In these early Dark Shadows paperbacks, there isn't anything supernatural, and Barnabas, the bloodsucker, hasn't even appeared yet. In this book, a couple of people come to stay at Collins' house. One of them is a reclusive man named Henry Collins. Victoria learns that he's got a secret room in the mansion where he stays. The mystery is that Henry apparently had a lover in New York City that died under suspicious circumstances. Soon, Victoria finds herself targeted as she nearly dies from various accidents around the house. Is Henry Collins trying to kill Victoria or help her? Also, is Henry her father? That's a good question. This was a good mystery novel that was aided by the through story in these books on Victoria, who grew up as an orphan, who's trying to locate her biological parents and why they abandoned her. Again, this was Dark Shadows number 3, Strangers at Collins House, by William Ross as Marilyn Ross. My 12th entry in today's countdown is Brian Smith's horror novel, The Gauntlet. This was published in 2023 by Grindhouse Press. The book begins with a guy named Nick and his married neighbor Krista getting into an affair. The two decide to take off for the Pocono Mountains to spend some quality time together in the sack while they decide what Krista should do about her annoying husband. The two stop for gas in a really bizarre small town in the middle of nowhere. Arriving in town, Nick is immediately assaulted by a guy wearing a mask and carrying a machete. It turns out that anyone from outside of town that enters the town's limits must compete in a gauntlet game. Nick and Krista are forced into crazy, violent contests similar to something you'd see in Netflix's The Squid Game. This was entertaining, and I enjoyed the wild ride that Nick and Krista are forced upon. It definitely kept my attention throughout the whole book. Again, this is The Gauntlet by Brian Smith. Number 11 is Vice Trap by Elliot Gilbert. This was originally published by Avon in 1958. It's now a reprint by Black Gat Books, which is an imprint of Starkhouse Press. The book is presented in first person by Nick, a mechanic who just recently served a prison sentence. Oddly, the cop who busted Nick in the first place is now friends with him. The cop's name is Madrid, and now he's dating Nick's former girlfriend, Lona. Madrid pitches to Nick that they should do a bank heist together during the town's parade. Madrid will volunteer to be on patrol that day, and he'll cover for Nick and his friends. But as these things go, it doesn't quite work out, and the whole thing goes to hell in a handbasket. This was a pretty good crime-noir paperback, and I always enjoy bank heist. I mean reading them, not performing them. I'm terrible with money. This was Vice Trap by Elliot Gilbert. My top 10 kicks off with the first installment in the Dragonheart series. The novel is called Viking Slave, and it was published in 2013 and authored by Griff Hosker. The book begins in 790 AD and introduces a young boy nicknamed Crow. He's shunned by his village, and he's picked on by his peers due to him being only half Saxon. Soon, this Saxon village is raided by Vikings, and Crow is captured along with his mother. Crow is renamed Gareth and begins to enjoy his new home with the Vikings. The Vikings introduce Gareth to an older warrior named Ragnar, who soon trains him to be a master swordsman. Over the next 200 pages, Gareth becomes a warrior, gains a family, and fights for his village by overtaking more Saxon villages and feuding with a rival. I felt like this was such a great journey, and I enjoyed the characters so much. Believe it or not, there's 22 more installments in this series, so I need to get to work reading more of these books. But again, this is Viking Slave by Griff Hosker, and I really enjoyed it. Number 9 is That Hellbound Train by Robert Bloch. This is a short story that was originally published in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction in 1958. The story stars a drifter named Martin. One night, Martin is nearing death, and the devil arrives on a long black train to take his soul to a warm place down under. But Martin offers a deal for the devil. He requests that he be allowed to live. Further, he wants a special watch that will allow him to stop time just once. Martin says he's going to stop time when he finds a happy place in his life that he's going to be content with. So the devil plays along, gives him the special watch, and Martin continues living. The readers tag along on Martin's self-discovery. He gains employment, gets super wealthy, gets comfortable, but he's hesitant about using the watch because he always feels like he can be happier tomorrow and the day after and so forth. This turns into a nightmare for Martin, pondering when his life will reach the pinnacle of happiness. It's a cautionary tale told brilliantly by Robert Bloch. This is a great, great read. Again, it's That Hellbound Train by Robert Bloch. My 8th entry is Suddenly at Singapore by Gavin Black. This is the first installment of the Paul Harris series, which ran from 1960 through 1979, encompassing 13 total books. Suddenly at Singapore was published in hardcover in 1960 and then later in paperback by Signet. The book, of course, stars Paul Harris, a World War II veteran who experienced life as a prisoner of war. He was held by Japanese forces alongside his brother. After the war, both Paul and his brother continued to live in Singapore and run a successful shipping and freighting enterprise. But one of the business deals they have is smuggling weapons into the good people of Southeast Asia so they can fend off all those communist overlords. This novel centers around Paul's brother being murdered execution style with a bullet to the back of the head. Paul attempts to find out who the murderer was while also fending off a pesky detective who thinks Paul had something to do with it. The book's first half was far better than the second, but I enjoyed the book overall. It's got a spy fiction feel to it, even a nautical escapism, but it doesn't really fall into the espionage realm. Paul is just a successful businessman who just gets caught up in adventures. Again, the book is called Suddenly at Singapore, and the author is Gavin Black. Number 7 on the countdown is Dark Justice. This is a brand new crime fiction novel that's being published on March 11th by Rough Edges Press. I have it in Kindle, and it's $3. The author is J.L. Hughes, and the book is what I like to consider a hunt the serial killer type of story. At 430 pages, it's a modern book, so it's got plenty of padding to get the page count up. But that's fine because the book is really entertaining and it held my attention. A town called Shadowhook in upstate New York is being terrorized by a serial killer nicknamed the Redeemer. He captures high-profile victims and then drains them of all of their blood. A New York Police Department homicide detective named Jade Carmichael is the protagonist. She's got a direct connection to the killer because years ago, he or she killed her mother in the same fashion. The book is the typical investigative mystery as the police examine clues, interview suspects, and eventually chase down the killer. I enjoyed the book and really liked this Jade character. There's some unexpected twists and turns that added to the enjoyment. Again, this is Dark Justice by J.L. Hughes. Sixth place goes to a short story titled The Hound of God. It's 39 pages and it's written by Jonathan Mayberry and published as an ebook in 2023 by Titan. What's cool about this short story is that it stars Solomon Kane, the Puritan hero that Robert E. Howard created. I've talked about Solomon Kane here on the show and reviewed his stories often on the blog. In this story, Solomon Kane arrives in a small village and discovers the entire population has been shredded apart. Body parts and mangled corpses are lying everywhere. Who did this kind of carnage? Kane finds animal prints that are mixed with over 20 boot prints from soldiers. So how did this ravenous creature kill this many people, but somehow spare the soldiers? Eventually, Kane discovers the horrible truth. This was about par for the course when it comes to Kane's stories. A lot of the stories featuring the character work in the same fashion, so I think Mayberry played it a bit safe, but that doesn't detract from the enjoyment at all. This was a solid read and a rare Solomon Kane story written by someone other than Robert E. Howard. Again, this was The Hound of God by Jonathan Mayberry. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. One click really helps me out. If you have a moment, click the like button in this video, subscribe, comment. I'll take all the interaction I can get because that's the whole reason why I do these videos. Be sure to turn on notifications for the channel. That way you get all the new videos when they come out. My number 5 pick is the 2007 novel Deadfall by Robert Leporello. This is the first of 2 books starring a survivalist strongman guy named John Hutchinson. In this book, Hutchinson, who's actually a full-time journalist, joins 3 friends on a hunting trip to Saskatchewan, Canada. They're dropped in by plane for a week of hunting and camping outdoors in the middle of nowhere. And their only weapons are bows and arrows. That's their deal. They archery hunt deer and elk. This deer hunter horror novel explodes when a group of men and women arrive in the nearby small town of Fiddler Falls and begins killing its citizens using advanced weaponry. So who are these crazed killers? Why are they running roughshod over the town? These 4 hunters are the only saving grace for the citizens. They must fight the bad guys in a most dangerous game sort of way. This book is like one big summer blockbuster movie with survival, helicopters, planes, Humvees, satellite weaponry, machine guns. It's like a combination of Rambo, Mad Max, The Wild Bunch, and The Most Dangerous Game. I loved this book. Again, it is Deadfall by Robert Leporello. My 4th place goes to The Sister of Cain by Mary Collins. This was originally published as a hardcover in the early 1940s and was just recently published in a brand new edition by Starkhouse Press. A pregnant woman named Hilda arrives at a California mansion to meet her husband's sisters. Hilda's husband's away fighting during World War II, and she needs a place of comfort to go to while she's pregnant. When she arrives, she meets the sisters, including the oldest, a domineering motherly figure named Pauline. It turns out that each sister in the house has a beef with Pauline. And then one night, Pauline's found dead in her bedroom with a knife in the back. It's up to a detective named Cassidy, who arrives and tries to figure out who the murderer is. The investigation digs up the family's history, the future inheritance, details of the will, and the individual motives each sister has in offing Pauline. Hilda is a remarkable character, and she ends up teaming with Cassidy to solve the case. I enjoyed the moody atmosphere of the mansion and the small suspect list. It was a slow build over 200 pages, but very rewarding in the end. Again, this is The Sister of Cain by Mary Collins. And kicking off my top 3 reads of February is John Blackburn's 1973 novel, Deep Among the Dead Men. This is the first of 2 books starring a journeyman named Bill Easter. Now, Easter has served as a mercenary, a smuggler, an oilman. He's been a gangster, an assassin, a bodyguard, and a lover. When the book begins, Easter's with his girlfriend and her father on a boat off the coast of a fictional country called Leonia. His newest scheme is to dive 100 feet down to salvage gold from a sunken ship. The problem is that the coast and waters are controlled by the newest dictator to the country. To get the ability to salvage the gold, Easter needs to get into Leonia and kill off the dictator and replace him with the last puppet dictator. After completing this mission, he can start the salvage process. But there's always problems with a good gold salvage, and Easter runs smack into a killer on board the salvage ship. Who's the killer? What's he or she after? The book mixes in elements of spy fiction, nautical adventure, and a mystery whodunit to make the narrative come alive. There's also a sense of humor injected into the story that kind of reminded me of John Gardner's Boise Oaks character. This book was excellent, and I just read the second Bill Easter book titled Mr. Brown's Bodies, which I'll cover on next month's ranking video. My runner-up to Best Book of February is V.C. Andrews' novel Flowers in the Attic. The book was published in 1979 and adapted into a film in 1987 and again in 2014. The book is presented in first-person narration by Kathy, a 12-year-old girl who accompanies her 14-year-old brother Chris and their twin siblings, 5-year-old Carrie and Corey, to their mother's childhood mansion. This secret journey and arrival at the mansion is after Kathy's father dies in a car wreck. Her mother Corinne tells the family that they must return to her childhood home because they've got no money. Her mother and father are extremely wealthy, but they kicked Corinne out of the family decades ago. Corinne never told her father she had kids. Through letters, she confides in her mother that she has a family and the explanation that her husband just recently died. Her mother agrees to secretly house Kathy and her siblings in the upstairs wing of the house right beside the attic. The deal is that Corinne will try to get back into good graces with her father, get written back into the will, and then will tell her father about the kids, and they'll all live happily ever after. But one night in the attic turns into a week, into a month, into years. Kathy and her siblings endure horrible treatment, both mental and physical abuse, and eventually have to decide if they should try to escape this makeshift prison that Corinne and her mother have made for the kids. This was a disturbing book, and it's got some incest in it, which adds to the controversial responses to the book back when it was first published and even today. It's a wild, wild book that makes for a captivating read. Now, I reviewed the book on the blog on February 14th, but I also discussed the book in depth for about a half hour with fellow booktuber Zach Skyver. You can search YouTube under his name. First name is Z like zebra, A like apple, K like king. Last name, S like Sam, K like king, I like igloo, V like Valentine, E like Edward, R like Romeo. Watch that video exchange between the two of us over the book. Again, this is Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews. All right, so my favorite book of February, we're down to the end. My favorite book of February was The Hound of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is the 4th Sherlock Holmes novel. It was originally published in magazine format in 1901 and then published in hardcover in 1902. In this book, a doctor named Mortimer visits Holmes and Watson and explains that a man named Charles Baskerville has died from a heart attack. The weird part is that he died out on the moors from cardiac arrest, and right beside of his corpse were giant hound prints. What type of dog scared Charles? It turns out that years before this murder, a Hugo Baskerville had kidnapped a local farmer's daughter and then was apparently killed by a large, demonic dog. Is this demonic dog on the loose again? Did the dog frighten Charles to death? Mortimer employs Watson to find out the answers. In the last act, Sherlock arrives to assist Watson in determining just what's happening in this spooky region of England. The book is just brimming over with atmosphere. You've got the foggy moors, the idea that something supernatural might be occurring, and of course, lots of death. The story is superb, the writing is excellent, and of course, the character development with the suspects is set at just the right pace for the discovery to be well earned. The Hound of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is a mandatory read. And there you have it. All 17 books I read in the month of February. My writing partner, Tom Simon, he also contributed one review to the blog in February, and that was Empire of Silence by Christopher Riocchio. Maybe saying that name wrong. That book isn't included in my list because I didn't read that one, but his review for the book was a positive one, and he seemed to enjoy the 800-page epic. Again, it's called Empire of Silence by Christopher Riocchio. Don't forget to check out the newest Paperback Warrior podcast episode, number 115, which just dropped on March the 3rd. I'll also have another podcast episode on March the 17th. In the meantime, you can read new reviews nearly every day at paperbackwarrior.com, and be sure to follow me on Facebook, X, Threads, and Instagram. Take care, and as always, thanks for watching.